not do that? Can we today, July 2024, I am petitioning all of Book Talk, all of Bookstagram, all of BookTube. Please do not let this become a thing. Hello friends, welcome back, or if you are just stumbling across this video randomly, welcome. I am Nova and this is Off My Rocker Reading. I'm saying it right off the bat so I don't forget to introduce myself because I always do. We are gathered today for something that is actually a long time coming. It is a book that I read in March. But due to various things, life circumstances for me and taking a break from videos, as well as my library hold on the book, like running out and then me having to wait for it again, I have been putting this off and putting this off and putting this off. But I am finally back to my full health. I have the book. This is the last day that I have the book. So it is the time, it is the day, this is the time and the place. We're actually finally going to talk about this book. I will not lie, I'm actually sitting here a little bit anxious for this video, which I don't usually feel that way anymore. I think I've gotten pretty comfortable with the format. But I think it's just because I just really don't know the best way to format this video. I'm trying to do it as concisely and in a way that's going to make sense to maybe people who haven't read this book but are interested to hear my thoughts. But I'm relatively new at this anyway, so I hope you can just kind of stick with me. I'm still just, figuring out like how the best way is to do this type of video where I'm only talking about like one book. Without any more preamble, we are talking about Don't Want You Like a Best Friend by Emma R. Albin. More on that title later. We're gonna get to that at the very end. You might be saying to yourself, Nova, why? Why are we talking about what's supposed to be a light-hearted Victorian sapphic romance that is serving us Bridgerton vibes but giving us almost a Parent Trap plotline? That just sounds like such a fun and lovely romp. Why do we have to talk about it in such a negative way? And look, friend, if you're saying that to me, I will tell you why. I will tell you exactly why, actually. One, because this is the book that I read, and this is the book that bothered me, and it's the book that I want to talk about. And I understand that a lot of times people make the argument that, if something is just light and for entertainment, that maybe it shouldn't be viewed as critically. Maybe we don't need to use as much critical analysis when reading it. I tend to be in the camp that disagrees. I think that it's important to have media literacy, and especially with reading, to be able to have some level of literary analysis and be able to analyze the things that we read. Otherwise, how are we ever going to spot the things that are problematic? How are we ever going to spot the things that are worthy of becoming classics, right? If we can't look at pieces of literature and... Sorry, my freaking strap is like bugging me. Yeah, and sorry, I'm not gonna like preach at you this whole time, but just that tends to be where I come from because I believe that you should go into pretty much everything with a critical eye. And that doesn't lessen my entertainment factor in any way, shape, or form. I'll just be honest with you. I suppose I was entertained reading this book, but for me, I just see a lot of issues with this. So if you are somebody in the camp of, you want to let people read what they want to read, you want to, not view it as critically if it's just like light and for entertainment, or even if you read this book and loved it, I really hope that you will still sit here with me and hear what I have to say and the reasons why I'm saying it. And here's why I think that it's important to know that, yes, things can just be lighter and for entertainment, but that doesn't change the fact that, an author still, in my opinion, has a responsibility to be presenting information, if it's not factual, in a way that lets you know that it's not factual, right? And this is where my problem with this book really begins, because it is classified as historical fiction. But in my reading of it, in everything that I know about the Victorian era, the Regency era that came right before that, in everything I know, this book is just wildly inaccurate in a way that I believe to be harmful. But really, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today if this author had done one very simple thing. And that would have been putting a disclaimer at the beginning of the book. Hey, this is just a light, fluffy, romanticized version of this era. In reality, women and queer people would have gone through much more struggle than this, but I wanted to write something that's just more of a romp, whatever. Put an author's note, put a disclaimer, or even, I wouldn't prefer it to be here, but if you were gonna say something in your acknowledgments, do that. But this author doesn't do any of that. And that's why I think that it's a problem. Because unfortunately, I don't think we can have it both ways. I don't think with the state that I see online of media literacy among readers, among consumers, I don't think that we can simply say, well, it's just for entertainment. Like, don't be critical about it. Like, it's just for fun. While at the same time, we know that there are people who are going to read stuff like this at face value. And so then here comes in how I think an author should just write a little something at the beginning of the book to say, hey, there's actually a lot more to this era. There's a lot more to the struggles that these people groups would have faced. But I just didn't want to unpack that in this book in particular. And that's completely fine. I have no problem with that. My problem comes in when you are giving me a book that is so whitewashed, where any sense of struggle is ripped out of it to the point where it feels like erasure. I think that the author is doing everybody a disservice when she chooses to not highlight any type of struggle and not say that to anyone, right? Because like we all know, like Bridgerton is super popular right now. And I like that show. I watch it with my partner. But I feel like Bridgerton is pretty clear about the fact that it is not historically accurate. It's a romanticized, fictionalized version of what these eras actually looked like, right? Because of that, I enjoy it and I consume it and I don't have an issue with it because I'm coming with the framework already that this is, shouldn't be taken as any type of real history. I'm just also of the opinion that if you're gonna write a historical novel, it should have more basis in history. And that's my opinion, that's my preference, but like, I think really good examples of this are Leigh Bardugo's The Familiar. That was chock full of dates and history and information about the Spanish Inquisition while still being like a magical fictional book. And I think that it was wonderful because of that. I also want to point out that I think the author could have fixed her problem in this book, again, with a simple author's note, but also if she had just made it a fictional universe. I just read The Honey Witch, which is also a new release, but it's by Sydney somebody. I'll put it on screen so you know I forget her last name, unfortunately. But she wrote it very loosely to feel Regency era-ish. However, she set it in a fictional world. So she gets to put really whatever she wants in it at that point. And I feel like the author could have easily just done that, honestly. So those are kind of all of my precursor thoughts to why I'm presenting this to you today. Again, I hope you hear out my criticisms, but the biggest debate for me has just been how to present this video, because I have a lot for you. There's a lot that I could say, there's a lot that I could go through. And the way that I'm going to do that, I think the best way is for me to set up our characters, give you kind of a plot overview, and then kind of start telling you some of my issues along the way. Originally, I have notes for every single chapter of this book, and I was just gonna try to go chronologically, but I think it would be better to talk about my issues with the romance and then talk about my issues with the actual story structure. So, right off the bat, I'm just gonna give you kind of our main characters. We get a prologue that introduces both of the main couples. So again, it is a sapphic romance, but there is a parent trap type plot line going on. So right away, we're introduced to Beth Demiroven, who is starting her very first season. She's like coming out on her very first season looking for a husband because her father was abusive to her mother, Cordelia Demirovan. She's a viscountess, I believe. He has passed away. He left them nothing. He sucked. And because of that, Beth really has to secure a husband or else they are going to basically end up destitute. And then we have Gwen. Gwen is taller and thin and blonde, and her full name is Gwen Havenfort. She is the daughter of Lord Dashiell Havenfort, I believe. This is her 4th season. She has just not found a husband in 4 seasons. She's not very interested in it, which right off the bat, the social implications at the time, like there would be scandal like surrounding that, like no questions asked. Like it was a fate worse than death to end up being a spinster, to end up being someone without a husband. So I don't really buy that everyone's just chill with the fact that she's been out for 4 seasons and nothing has happened. But Lord Havenfort is described right off the bat as being a rake, even to the point where he is trying to flirt and seduce other debutantes. So other people Gwen's age, basically, during the seasons. But the way that Gwen talks about it is like, oh, he's just so silly quirky for that. Like, oh, my silly quirky dad. Like, he's just so charming and dashing and everything. Like, it's totally fine that he's, like, trying to, like, seduce 20-year-old girls. Which, also, and we even know from something like Bridgerton, that, like, that would be the end for a young debutante. If she's caught, you know, unchaperoned with like some older man, right? Like that's not a good look. So the fact that it's being talked about in such a lighthearted way, as if it's not a big deal, was already, again, kind of icky to me right at the beginning of this book. But I was like, okay, we'll give it a chance, right? The other thing that I want to point out is that chapter 1, Gwen and Beth meet at a ball, which maybe this is just a me thing, but I obviously think, based on the title, Don't Want You Like a Best Friend, that this is more of a like best friends to lovers thing. But they're only meeting at the beginning of this book. And that really is my other big issue with this book, is the pacing. Let me just give you an idea of that, how I think that the story structure was just an utter fail, because they don't meet till the beginning of the book. Then they see each other about 6 times, chaperoned at these big events. So really, like, how much are you actually getting to know each other? How much are you actually hanging out? And after that, like, 6th time, they're already in love. And that's like the 38 or 40% mark in this book, which I just don't like. Let me give you the plot kind of up to there, and then I'm going to tell you why I think everything after that fails as well, but in a different sense. Beth and Gwen meet at this ball, and through an awkward, tense interaction between them and their parents, when they like introduce their parents, they realize that their parents already know each other, and there's some kind of weird history there that makes them not like each other, that makes it very tense. And after kind of snooping about that, they find out that their parents, when they were young, kind of, I think, like grew up together. And so they knew each other, and then they were kind of in love. It was thought that they were going to get married. And then Cordelia, Beth's mom, ended up deciding to marry somebody else for security, for, the wealth and the title and everything. But now Lord Havenfort also has wealth and a title and yada, yada, yada. So that's kind of the backstory there. But what the girls realize is that if they get their parents together, then, like, their parents get married, then the pressure will be off of Beth to find a husband, because they'll have the security of Lord Havenfort and his title and his wealth. And Gwen will also have less pressure, and they can, they don't have to find husbands. There's no pressure anymore. They're taken care of. It's secure. And that's the plan. And they're going to try to, through various tactics, kind of shove their parents together in an effort to make them fall in love again. Some of those antics include something that I find rather historically inaccurate when you consider the time period, such as them being at a picnic thing where Gwen just addresses the entire party of people and is orchestrating this whole croquet tournament. That would not have been allowed. Like, she as a young woman would not have been able to address this many people. Like, a woman's place was to be like demure and like silent, honestly. Like, these girls were up for auction for these men to like propose to and marry. So yeah, just that is like very historically inaccurate, and is something that bugged me, and just shows you that the tone of this book is so modern. There's not a lot of thought going on to something like that, like the intricacies of how this society functioned at this time and what the expectations were, what people's like social roles were, right? I was just reading a book that was about the Victorian era. It was a little bit more of like a lighthearted fiction book. It didn't really dig into anything real, but one passage of it was talking about how literally if you were invited over to like be in somebody's like parlor and it was like a little party, where you were sat or where you were stood literally indicated to everybody else your social standing with the host and in general. Because you have to remember, this is all these people do. Like this is all they do because they just like have money. So this is their whole lives. So all of these little things in just the way that, you know, a young woman would be allowed to address someone is all very nitpicked. And there's no attention placed on that in this book. And again, I'm not saying you have to write this super detailed, super historically accurate fictional book. I'm not saying that. But like, maybe try a little. And if you're not going to, again, tell us that. Or just make up your own world, right? Around the beginning of the book, we get the vibe that there's this more political thing going on where Lord Havenfort and his political party are trying to pass this act called the Matrimonial Causes Act. I'm just saying this now. I'm going to explain that a little more later, but it is established at the very beginning of the book that there's this Matrimonial Causes Act. Also, at one of these social events, Beth meets a young man, Lord Monston. Okay, he is also going to become a player, so I'm just mentioning him now that he was established like this early in the book. We also start getting these little vibes, you know, as they're hanging out or they're at these social events that, you know, they really just want to talk to each other and they just want to be with each other. And I feel a little jealous because Lord Monston's walking with Beth. Why do I feel like that? So the author's like trying to lay some groundwork for them having feelings for each other already. This is chapter 7 in my notes, and that's already being established. So just a couple of things for you there. So you're getting like the whole picture. Then we get in chapter 8, those feelings that Gwen has been having kind of come to a point, and she's super jealous of Lord Monston. They're all sitting outside this patisserie and she's just having a hard time with it. Her dad basically picks up on that. And again, let's be real. At this time, a young woman having any kind of overflow of passions, whether it's about a person or politics or anything that is not her place to do so, immediately asylum, immediately hysterectomy, right? And I'm being a little hyperbolic, but seriously, like, young ladies had a very, very tiny little box that they could fit in, and anything outside of that, they were at risk for being scandalized, being ostracized, and even going so far as like being diagnosed with like hysteria. So for her dad to like recognize these feelings that she's having and just like not like bat an eye at it is so unrealistic to me. Like this queer relationships, they were not like allowed back then. Like we had like the criminalization of Oscar Wilde. There's precedents now, like we understand like kind of how some of that would have worked. It wouldn't have been him just like fine with this, right? Even to the extent where he kind of sends Gwen off to, take the dishes to the kitchen just so she can go and see her housekeeper and her maid making out, because they've apparently been in love and they're like secret lesbian lovers, but everyone also kind of knew, which again, if they knew, asylum, that's the only time that the asylum and women and queer women being at risk of that is mentioned in this entire book, when Mrs. Gilp and the other one are like, oh yeah, we wanted to be married, but we're gonna be sent to the asylum, or like something like that. And that's the only time that shows up, and it's very much like in passing, where it's like, come on, that would have been the reality. Like, it would have been the reality for these women if they were in love and everything. Their relationship would have had to be completely secret, not this whole household like knowing about it. Like, come on. I'm not saying that never happened, but just the likelihood of that happening is so teeny tiny. And that's a big problem that I have with this as well, and that you're going to see as it goes on, is every single person that finds out about Gwen and Beth are just like, oh yeah, I can see it. Oh yeah, like you and Miss Demerove and you and Miss Havenfort. Like, nobody would have been reacting like that. And then chapter 9, already they are at another ball. They go off together because Gwen is upset because she's realizing her feelings, and they have this passionate, steamy kiss in some back room or the wine cellar or something. And again, I'm just like, come on. Like, these girls would not have even known their basic anatomy. If you during this time period and you were like found out and everything, hysteria, immediate hysteria, her passions are overflowing and she needs treatment and bloodletting and doctor, like, right? Like, how are you gonna have this steamy kiss where you're gonna start sucking on Gwen's bottom lip when you don't even know how any of this works? You wouldn't have been told about what course with your partner was until you were getting married to a man, right? So, and I am specifically talking about, the ladies that were more part of the ton, that were part of, higher society. People didn't care as much about, the maids and the housekeepers and people who were like working class. But so I am specifically referring to these kinds of young ladies that had expectations, that were, part of the seasons and then would get engaged. Like, that's a huge no-no. They had to remain the purest of the pure. And any little thing could ruin that. Them lifting their skirt to go over a mud puddle would be scandalous during this time. And again, they kiss, and this, this would have been something super shocking. This would have been something neither of them had ever seen before. So their kind of non-reaction to that happening was just kind of like, what? To me? Like, they're both just like, oh, okay, yeah, like that tracks or something. Like, I don't know. I hope you understand, like, what I'm saying with all of this too. I always worry that I'm gonna like post something and everybody's gonna be like, girl, what are you talking about? Like, it's fine. So I hope I'm making sense. And if I'm not, do tell me though, because I'm always paranoid about that. Sippy. They start kind of thinking about like what future they could even have at this point, where, and that's another thing to point out historically. I know I'm giving you a lot of like the more historical context of all these things, but people start saying to them like, oh, like, well, Beth can just get married and then, you guys can be companions. It's normal for ladies to have companions and for men to have companions. And that's kind of her trying to say, like, it's the people trying to be like, like these, queer relationships, basically, they do happen, but it's, it's in secret and all this stuff. And it's like, not really though. Like, because even at this time, there's a lot of precedence for like female friendships being like almost like overly close, and we can recognize, today that a lot of the times probably that's because it was two people who were like romantically actually in love. But the like mind of society at this time was, oh yeah, the girls can, sleep in the same bed, they can kiss, they can, any of that, they can write each other like almost like love letters and stuff. But people would have still thought it was just like friendship. Like, people didn't think women could have like romantic interest in each other unless that was like a problem, unless it was hysteria and her uterus is out of control, right? So that's my other thing, like all these people like seeing their relationship and being like, oh yeah, they like each other, and like that's not how they would have thought of it. They would have been like, oh yeah, you guys are really close friends, right? And literally chapter 10, Gwen realizes she's in love with Beth. So let me just give you perspective about that. Chapter 10 out of 28 chapters, and then a long epilogue, they're already in love. They've seen each other like 8 times, maybe. And that's only at like big social events, and they're already in love. And this is where it seems like their efforts are kind of paying off for their parents as well, because her dad is like, yeah, I'm taking you and Miss Demiroven, you and Miss Demiroven and Viscountess Demiroven to the theater, because we're gonna celebrate, because I think the Matrimonial Causes Act is gonna pass, okay? They go on this outing, and it's supposedly a date between Lord Havenfort and Lady Demiroven. And I am just like, is that how it works? I am gonna be honest, I cannot tell you for certain. I saw certain reviews saying like them just like going to a restaurant, like it's a little out of the time period, but you know, whatever, take that with a grain of salt because I don't really know for sure. But they go to this restaurant, they eat oysters together at the table, and they literally all get each other at the table. Like, I'm not even kidding. There's this whole scene about basically how hot and bothered everybody gets watching each other eat oysters. This mom and dad and their 2 daughters. And I'm like, I don't know. That's a choice. It's a little weird. It made me like uncomfy. And I know that that's, you know, a personal thing, but yeah, just a little odd to me. But they go to this theater show after that. And then after, Gwen is like, oh, father, can Beth come stay the night with me tonight? We didn't even get to talk about the theater show. And they're like, oh, sure. And then you'll come over for breakfast, Cordelia. And so the mom leaves and they go off. And this is where, in chapter 13, they proceed to go to the Havenfort estate, have a little sleepover, where they have explosive, passionate lesbian sex for the entire night. And I'm like, Again, these girls who wouldn't have even known or understood their own anatomies, whose purity is a commodity during this time period, they just somehow know what to do for each other and with each other. Like, it was just so unrealistic to me. There was no real like awkwardness or fumbling or anything that you even get from like modern romances sometimes, like, and these were girls that would have been so sheltered. So I just didn't like that. And it's also so early in the book. But of course, since we're only 40% through, we have to get some kind of main conflict going on, right? We're only 40% in. We gotta think of something. How can we drag this out? Because they're already in love. And let me say here as well, this is not a friends to lovers book. This is like insta love more than anything else. And that's fine. But just kind of this little bit of this like farming for tropes that this author did with the title and the blurb and everything is something that I really don't like. Don't tell me it's gonna be something if it's just simply not. It's a personal preference of mine. I've said it before in other videos, but that really bugs me. Like, you're just trying to get people who like friends to lovers to read your book, and then they do, and people are just going to be disappointed because that's not what it is, right? I don't like that again, like farming for tropes and farming for readers based on tropes. I don't like it. But, they have to get a main conflict. So basically the main conflict turns out to be that, well, Beth has already been, chatting it up with Lord Monston, and it's a really good match for her. So despite the fact that we already established that Lord Havenfort could afford Beth and her mom security and wealth and comfort, Beth needs to pursue this match with Lord Monston for security and wealth and comfort. Yeah. Let's do a little class exercise. Based on that information, okay, how do you think this book is going to resolve? Write down your little hypothesis for me, and let's see if you're right at the end, okay? Based on that little premise right there, based on the fact that we're really going with a plot line where the characters don't just go with the original plot that would have afforded them security and comfort and wealth because she has to go with somebody else who offers her security and comfort and wealth. Please, Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, then Gwen is sad for a while because Monston. Beth is sad. She's not really into it, and chapter 18, they are already referring to each other as lovers. I would just like to point out here that in this supposed best friends to lovers book, they spend more of the book referring to each other as lovers than they do as best friends. Also, they did meet at the beginning of the book. Don't forget that. Yeah, and then basically it just progresses, and Beth is supposed to get proposed to by Lord Monston, and it's just like, well, this is what we got to do for wealth and security and comfort, except, because we totally don't have that other option of wealth and security and comfort that would actually afford both of us happiness or anything. Like, that's not real. This is also where we get a little bit of the vibe that Lord Monston's dad is kind of a jerk. Lord Ashmond, he just seems like abusive and misogynistic, and he sucks, and he opposes the Matrimonial Causes Act, okay? Beth gets engaged to Lord Monston, and when she gets engaged to Lord Monston, his dad, who's a jerk, Lord Ashmond, he's abusive, he's misogynistic, he's the worst, okay? He basically forbids Beth and her mother from having further contact with the Havenports, with Gwen and her dad, because we need conflict, basically. But really, it's because Lord Havenfort is for the Matrimonial Causes Act. Lord Ashmond is not. And if Beth is going to marry his son, he does not want them to be supporting his political nemesis, basically, which is cause for all of this sadness between Beth and Gwen. They can't see each other anymore, and that just spirals into all of this angst, really, from both of them, but specifically from Gwen. After that, another little thing I want to point out, they're at a horse races, and Monston just kisses Beth because a horse wins or something, and because they're engaged now. Again, not super, you would not have just seen people kissing during this time period. That was something very much that would have happened behind closed doors. So once again, we're just coming from this very modern perspective. We're not actually trying to tell a story in this time period. We're just using the aesthetic of the time period. And I think that that's kind of lame, in my opinion. Oh, this is where we are introduced to Bobby, who is Gwen's cousin. They're at a ball and Gwen is all sad, so she basically gets drunk in a corner with Bobby, which the scandal of that would have gone crazy. Why are we acting like it would have just been totally normal for her to drink too much champagne and cause a scene and be giggly and knock things over in the corner? That would have been a huge deal, and we're supposed to just act like that was fine. Chapter 22, we get Gwen coming home with her father at 4 a.m, and they're boisterously drunk. And I'm in what world? In what version of the Victorian era in England, in London in 1857, in what world would a young woman have been out until 5 a.m. and gotten drunk, even if it was with her dad? Let's be for real, please. And it's so unnecessary too. That's just such an easy thing to not have your character do, right? So why are you doing it in this book where it doesn't even remotely suit the time period? Oh, ridiculous. I hated that. Then Beth and Gwen are being pretty mean to each other. Really, Gwen is being pretty mean to Beth, just over this whole thing, over the fact that Beth can't really associate with her anymore. And Bobby and Gwen's other cousin Albie and his fiance Meredith, they're all seeing this and they know, right? They know, which again, come on. But they're you guys have to figure this out. So they strategically get them out into this garden where they conclude that they still love each other, and they make out, and they realize that, oh, but we didn't have to do any of this, because if Lord Havenfort proposes if Lord Havenfort proposes to Lady Demeroven, then, they can have the wealth and security and comfort that they already knew that they were going to have and was the basis for the entire plot and plan in the first place, but that we just conveniently forgot for another third of the book. Why did we do this? Why? think of a better conflict, please. It's a non-conflict at that point. You can't tell us that they're doing something for something and then say, oh no, they just can't do that for that something because somebody else is going to offer them the same something. Like, it's ridiculous. And let's wrap this up in a nice little bow with the plot that would have solved the entirety of our issues from the very beginning. Society will no longer care about us if our parents get married. Yeah. Did you not think of that in like chapter 4? Was that not the entire premise of this parent trap plotline that you love putting in all your blurbs? Like, hello? And then again, they just start trying to throw Lord Havenfort and Lady Demeroven together. And Beth like argues with her mom about her marriage to Monston and how Lord Ashman sucks, and they already had to deal with her dad that sucked, so she doesn't want to do it again. And the mom's just like, but wealth and security and love and happiness and blah blah blah. And I was like, I'm sorry, were you not like going out with Lord Havenfort before? Like, so ridiculous. Meredith, at one point right before Beth is going to go off and be with Monston for all of these engagement activities and probably isn't going to see Gwen anymore for a while at least. Meredith, which again, I'm sorry, it's Gwen's cousin Albie's fiance, Meredith, who's helping them out, takes Beth to this little bedroom so that Gwen and Beth can be together for one last time. And they like thank her. And Meredith goes, oh, no problem. Like, basically, no problem. You would do the same thing for me and Albie. And this is where I'm just like, come on. Queer erasure. Like, right? Like, no, they wouldn't do the same thing for you and Albie because they wouldn't have to do the same thing for you and Albie. Right? You and Albie are a man and a woman who will just get married in society like the expectation is. You wouldn't have to prowl around in secret like this. You wouldn't have to, be at risk of being found out, even though they basically act like that wouldn't even be a thing, which it would be. But right? Like, and that's where I'm like, it just, again, it's not doing what you think it's doing. And that goes for the Matrimonial Causes Act too, because to flesh out what that is a little bit, that was a real act, I think actually in 1857, that basically shifted the decision about divorce. Like if a woman wanted to divorce, she didn't have to go to the church anymore. She didn't have to go petition the church for a divorce. She could go to the courts, right? And in this book, the author acts like that solves all of women's problems about divorce and being oppressed and not having a voice or decisions ever. Like, that's just gonna solve all of it. Like, Beth wouldn't even be having this problem with Monston if the Matrimonial Causes Act was a thing. Like, that's a real thing that is said in this book. And it's like, girl, no. Like, this is a real act that got passed, but you still have to see the immense discrimination against women who petitioned the court for divorce. Just because it shifts over from the church to the courts does not mean that changed. Does not mean that it was almost really any easier, because the courts were still extremely biased against giving women divorce. They had to bring a whole plethora of arguments about why they should be allowed to have a divorce to the court to even be considered, where a man could just be like, I want a divorce because she's not good enough, and divorce, right? Or really, the husband could just send her to an asylum for the rest of her life too, if he didn't want a wife. So stop, like, don't act like this one thing, this one little piece of progress that was made in history at this certain point solves all of women oppression forever and ever, right? Just don't talk about it that way then. Say, oh, this is one step towards, making it more equal, or yada, 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 whatever, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just what I don't like about it, is it's just like this very surface level understanding of what these experiences would have been for these oppressed people groups. And that is a problem to me. That's a problem to me if you're not going to highlight the fact that you as an author, you don't want to dig into those subjects. Say that then. But then finally, it really basically, the book concludes with, before we get into some of the ending craziness of it, the book concludes with Beth and her mom, really her mom, finally standing up to Lord Ashmond and being like, no, women should be able to divorce their husbands, and we do support the Matrimonial Causes Act, and yada, yada, yada. And basically like breaking the engagement and saying like, scandal be like, we're gonna break this engagement, and it is what it is. After that, they just literally show up at the Havenfort's doorstep, and Beth's mom like literally just proposes marriage to Lord Havenfort. Is like, will you marry me? And ta-da! Everybody's issues are solved because everybody wanted to be together anyway. So all of this conflict was for absolutely nothing, and they can just be happy, right? That's literally the ending. I'm like I'm not even kidding. Like, that's just it. They just decide, oh yeah, we can break this engagement, and we can go propose. So why do I keep saying that? We can go propose to the Havenforts, and we'll be happy, like we could have been 20 chapters ago, because Chapter 8, we were all already in love. So, but there are a couple little things that I want to note before I bid you adieu, because there were some choices made at the end of this book, okay? In the epilogue, we find out that Lord Havenfort and Lady Demeroven have gotten married. But is anyone seeing where I'm going with this? Beth and Gwen are now stepsisters. They're stepsisters. The book ends with the lesbian lovers becoming stepsisters. And not only are they stepsisters, okay? They are stepsisters, and Beth's mother, and Gwen's now stepmother, is about to have a baby. They're going to have a younger sibling who they are both biologically related to, that's going to call them both sister. And that small child is going to grow up thinking that their sisters are incestuous lovers. What? Why? Which I guess it was inevitable if you're trying to make this kind of plot line, right? Like, of course that would happen. But really? That is it's so weird. It's just so weird. And I don't know, I don't know what you could have done, but maybe you should have done something different, because that's a choice. That's really a choice, and not one that I'm a fan of. That's so weird. Am I alone in thinking that? Because that's off to me. And the last thing I want to leave you with is that the book ends with them basically setting up what the premise of the second book is going to be in the Mischief and Matchmaking series, or maybe it's Matchmaking and Mischief, I don't care. They basically are at this party, and they set up this idea that Bobby, Gwen's cousin Bobby, that we got introduced to, is going to fall in love in the second book with Beth's cousin James, that we get introduced to at the very end. And they're gonna kind of, play matchmaker and set it up. So that's when I went on Goodreads, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to read the second book. However, I just want to see. And that's when I saw that. And that's when I saw that the second book is going to be called You're the Problem, It's You. The whole time, the title was a Taylor Swift lyric. Don't do that. Can we not do that? Can we today, July 2024, I am petitioning all of Book Talk, all of Bookstagram, all of BookTube. Please do not let this become a thing. Please, can we not normalize doing this? Naming our traditionally published books things that we would name a Wattpad fan fiction that we wrote when we were 13. I'm begging. I am on my proverbial knees begging you right now. I really hope there are people out there who agree with me, because I can't handle that. My heart, I can't handle that. I think I think that's where I have to leave you with this one. Yeah, let me know if you stuck with me this long. Let me know what you think. I'm just so curious. I hope that there are people out there who resonate with my opinions, because I think that it's super important. Just getting women's perspectives right and getting queer perspectives right in fiction like this is something that's just really important to me, and I hope other people out there feel the same way. So let me know. You can absolutely, like, subscribe, anything like that. But if you want to leave a comment here, I will definitely see it. But as always, my social medias are in the description, and I'm mostly on Instagram. So if you reach out to me on there, I will definitely get back to you. I would love to hear if this resonated with you, or even if you have a rebuttal to the things that I'm saying. I would love to hear that as well. I'm very open to that. So yeah, just let me know. I just want to find, community, and hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you'll join me again. I think my next video will be a reading wrap up. So I will see you then. Bye.